We've learned a lot about the torso in this series. It may even be a little difficult to remember all that we learned. So today we're going to put together the pieces of theory concerning the torso that we've collected and see how they mesh with what we see in reality. The torso is the body minus the limbs and the head and neck. There are two major bony structures in the torso, the ribcage and the pelvis. The torso is the heaviest part of the body, and so it's the primary consideration in all bodily movement. Ideally, the torso is not bent, because when it's bent, it is shortened. Understanding this is as simple as bending a piece of paper and seeing that it becomes shorter. While this shortening is undesirable when it's done by a bend at the front or back, what do we see when a person is standing? We see that people tend to have a bend forward at their lower back. The top end of the ribcage is pulled back and down, while the bottom end is pushed forward. At the pelvis, we see the top front end pulled forward and down, while the back of the pelvis becomes angled, with the top end forward and the bottom end back and up. These rotations of the two major bony structures of the torso lead to a hollowing of the back and protrusion of the abdomen. This shortens the torso at both the front and the back, and that means your thoracolumbar fascia, which goes up and down your spine, will not be at its full length either. Fascia is like an elastic band. It has to be pulled into its full length to be tense, so it can provide resistance for the muscles that attach to it, which means limp fascia is malfunctioning fascia, and it will not provide you with support the way it's supposed to. This causes people's bodies to droop. When there is not appropriate tension at the back, the front falls forward. Not only does this make your belly look bigger than it should, it leads to pain and many other health problems. But is this all true? Let's take a look at a picture of someone everyone would agree has poor posture. Someone who suffers from very severe kyphosis will always have a significant bend at the lower back, and the ribcage will appear to be tilting back while the pelvis is tilted forward. Though these people are often said to have forward head posture, we can see that it's in fact the lower ribs, the abdomen, or the pelvis that is the furthest forward part of these people's bodies. That is the inevitable result of a shortened torso that protrudes forward. Now let's take a look at what is often considered good posture. Strangely enough, we see something very similar. We see a bend at the back, a tilting back of the ribcage, and a pelvis that is pulled forward and down at the front. So what makes this good posture? Well, the truth is, this is not good posture. This posture may not appear as jarring and alarming to us as the ones we saw in those with severe kyphosis, but it's still a serious problem. These examples that are supposed to show good posture show people who are shortening themselves and causing themselves harm. But what about someone with what is called posterior pelvic tilt, or PPT? It's claimed that these people have a pelvis that is rotated too far back. Surely they will present a different kind of postural problem for us. Let's take a look. As you can see, though there are some small differences, the bend at the lower back is still there. The ribcage is quite severely tilted back, and the pelvis, far from being back, is extremely far forward. It seems the posture experts are wrong again. Do all these people have postural problems? Yes, absolutely. In fact, they seem to all have more or less the same postural problem. Now, you may have heard about studies done that prove that posture has no effect on pain. And people use these studies to argue that posture is irrelevant to pain and other health problems. But this is simply wrong. The issue is that clearly the people conducting these studies do not know what good posture is. Any of these people could experience pain because all of them have bad posture. Yet in a study, they would be broken down into those with good posture and those with bad posture. But that's not accurate. They are all shortening. None of them have properly functioning fascia. So of course, you would not find a correlation between those with bad posture and those with pain, because they all have bad posture. I contend that the description of poor posture that I've laid out, which is based on the work of Jeando Masoero, as well as F.M. Alexander and François Delsarte, gives us clear criteria for determining postural dysfunction. And unfortunately, Nearly everyone in the modern world suffers from it. How can that be? How could everyone have bad posture? But if you think about it, why wouldn't that be the case? Has your average person ever learned anything about posture? Certainly not. The few that have been taught to imitate this. They've been taught to shorten. I'm sure some imagine that, yes, the average person has poor posture, but not great athletes. Surely they have good posture. And while some great athletes may have slightly better posture, athletes' focus is not on their posture. High-level athletics are often extremely demanding and push one to do things that wear down the body. That is why so many athletes injure themselves. How many CrossFitters and other gym rats manage to go a month without re-inflaming some nagging injury? Athletes are athletic, but there is no reason to believe they know anything about posture, and observation shows that they do not have good posture. Great athletes are simply those who manage to be the most athletic despite their poor posture. So what else can we learn from Masoero, Alexander, and Delsarte? We've seen that we want the weight of the torso to be behind the legs, as this lengthens the iliotibial tract or IT band, the major fascia of the leg. When the weight of the torso is back, it will help lift the front of the pelvis and keep the legs straight. But we must bear in mind that this is not all about moving weight back. As we've seen, the top end of the ribcage for most people is already way too far back, and since that's habitual for most people, the moment that you ask them to move their middle torso back, they will move their upper torso back. This is a problem that must be anticipated. We also do not want the lower sacrum to move back, as when the pelvis is rotated forward at the front, the bottom end will be pushed back and up. We need the upper sternum and lower sacrum to go forward to counterbalance when the mid-torso goes back. The tools we have at our disposal for dealing with postural problems can be broken down into two categories. First are our directions or orders that we give ourselves. The way for us to rationally control our body is to give ourselves the correct directions. Most people have probably tried to lift their ribcage up at some point in their life in order to appear taller and more confident. But unfortunately, most people do this by lifting at the front, which is really pulling the ribcage back and down and pushing the lower ribs forward. But if you know that that is undesirable, you can give yourself directions for lifting your ribcage before you do it. You can say to yourself, I will not pull my upper sternum back, but will instead pull my lower sternum and lower ribs back when I lift my ribcage. You can rationally guide and control your actions if you have the knowledge of what you want to do. Part of this process will require that you have names for the parts of the body that you're manipulating, so that you can make directions. This is why we invent specific names for spots on bones and bony structures, like the lower sternum or the iliacs. We can give ourselves orders, but that does not mean that we have followed our orders. In fact, experience proves that most people will not be able to follow their orders at first, and will often do the exact opposite of what they intend. And worse yet, they will not feel that they're doing the opposite of what they wanted to do. They will think they're succeeding when in reality they're failing. Here is where the second tool comes in. The way to deal with this serious problem is with visual feedback as well as objects like a yardstick or ruler. With visual feedback from a video recording or mirror, you can confirm whether or not you're doing what you intended to do. If you place a ruler between your body and a wall, it will help you definitively maintain a distance between that part of your body and the wall. It can reveal when you've pulled back away from the wall, and it can also prevent you from moving forward towards the wall. If you have multiple rulers, you can maintain a distance between multiple parts of your body and a wall. While visual feedback is crucial to understanding what you're doing, simple objects like a ruler can be extremely helpful when used properly. They can assist you in a practical sense to successfully make gestures that would otherwise be too difficult to do in your current state. The method for putting a set of directions into action is to first use your memory to recall the orders that you want to implement, and once the orders are clear in your mind, you can put them all into action simultaneously on a 1, 2, 3 count. You begin the adjustment on 1, are in the middle of the adjustment at 2, and end the adjustment at 3. There is 1 second between 1 and 2, and 1 second between 2 and 3. At the end of the 2 seconds, you can check to see if you've succeeded using your video recording, mirror, or physical object. In the end, the desire is to have the upper sternum, lower sternum, 8th ribs, and iliacs all be on the same plane, and for that plane to be behind or in line with the instep, which is at the front of the ankle. This leads to maximum lengthening of the torso and body generally. We also want the lower back to be vertically straight from just above the butt to the height of the armpit. We do not want to see a rounding back of the lower back, which is often seen when the third lumbar vertebra moves too far back and down. Lifting the ribcage up away from the pelvis will also be necessary for most people who have spent so much of their life pulling their ribcage down towards their pelvis. One last consideration that was not previously mentioned is that people tend to overly widen their lower ribs at the front. When the lower ribs are pushed forward, that widens the front and narrows the back. It's not hard to imagine that if you grabbed on to the lower end of a ribcage and pulled it apart at the front, that would produce a force that prevented the rest of the ribcage from fully expanding. That's a major problem because your lungs are at the top end of your ribcage. You need that part of your ribcage to expand with each breath, whereas this overexpansion in the abdominal region does not help you with breathing, and instead causes your organs, which sit in the abdominal cavity, to spill forward and down. We can use the direction to pull our lower ribs together at the front in order to expand the back. Try adding that to the directions to pull the lower sternum and iliacs back and up, and the upper sternum forward and up. See if it changes the adjustment. Thank you for watching this series about learning to control your torso. I hope I've given you some useful information and procedures for understanding your torso and manipulating it for the better. And if you're interested in getting direct assistance from a teacher concerning your posture, I do offer lessons in the Initial Alexander technique. Lessons, which are conducted one-on-one over Zoom, are designed to help you learn how to problem-solve challenges to your equilibrium. It's easily observed that most people, when their balance is threatened, will pull their upper sternum and head back, which is done by moving the lower ribs forward. This is irrational and leads to further unbalance, which can be dangerous especially as you age. In an Initial Alexander technique lesson, you will learn to take control over how you use your body, and your responses to challenges to your equilibrium will become reasonable as opposed to out of control. So if you would like to accelerate your learning and gain poise and confidence in your body, please visit my website, mechanicsofpoise.com, to book a lesson or to learn more about the Initial Alexander technique system. Questions and comments are always welcome in the comment section below or at my email delsartelessons@protonmail.com.